Welcome to Lighten the Legal Career Path. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. Whether you're a new attorney looking for inspiration or guidance, or further along in your career, wondering how to get to the next level, or someone that's just simply curious about the legal world, you're in the right place. We'll be talking to female and BIPOC attorneys not only about their remarkable stories of success, but the challenges they've faced along the way, the lessons they've learned, and their valuable insights about their career and the road ahead.
Hi, my name is Darlene Gartrell. I'm with Aon and Claims Counsel and Senior Vice President.
Let's dive into today's conversation. Welcome, Darlene. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. We had a great conversation last week, and then we sort of honed in on this area of advocating for yourself. So I definitely want to dive into the meat of that conversation a little later. But why don't we start by setting the stage with you? Talk with us about what you're doing right now. You've been at Aon. You've had this incredible career at Aon for over 20 years, which is incredible. Tell us what you do, and tell us what you've spent the last 20 years doing.
Well, thank you, Erica, and thank you very much for having me. And before we get started, I just wanted to be clear that anything you hear today on this podcast are my opinions, right? And they should not be attributed to my employer. But going back to the question, I have been with Aon, as you say, over 20 years. In my role as claim counsel, I really help our policyholders whom we place coverage for with the markets navigate the claims process. And that could be that's particularly in the executive liability space, which covers directors and officers liability, employment practices liability, um, fiduciary liability, and various types of coverage that are designed to protect the company's balance sheet. So when there is a claim that comes in against one of those policy and our company has placed the particular coverage, then I may become involved if there is particularly any claim issues or coverage issues. So I think of myself as a coverage lawyer wrapped into also employment lawyer, because I also have to have some knowledge of EPLI, employment, as well as securities under the D&O policy. And so that's what I do. And oftentimes my day involves interacting and negotiating with insurance carriers to achieve a positive result for the policyholder.
Great. Wow. So you jumped into Aon over 20 years ago. And, nowadays, anyone being in a job for like 3 years is like longevity, right? So tell us a little bit. First of all, you went from law school into private practice. You worked in litigation for a few years before going to Aon. Can you cast your mind back to that time when you were at the law firm and you decided, okay, I want to go in-house or I want to go to Aon? Can you talk to us a little bit about that period of time in your life? What made you make that decision? And twofold question, why have you stayed so long?
Good question, Erica. And it was so long ago, but it seemed like yesterday, right? So, and that just really is a testament to time really flies. It waits for no one. And so for me, I finished law school, immediately went to work for a small firm in the Los Angeles area doing tort defense litigation. And I was preparing to become this great litigator. And then as life has it, I, married my husband and we moved to the East Coast due to a job opportunity. So, but for that change, I probably would have still stayed in litigation. And that just goes to show you, sometimes your plans or what you think your future may hold may veer in a totally different direction. So at the time we moved to the East Coast and, having experienced and survived the California bar and decided that one time was enough, I did not want to take another bar exam. But when I moved to the East Coast, I thought, well, what could I do while I'm here that I could still use my legal skills and knowledge without taking another bar exam? And at the time, I relocated from the West Coast to the East Coast. My firm was interfacing with insurance companies to become members of their panel. And so I reached out to
Mm.
one of those insurance companies at the time. It was Chubb.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, I get hired on as a claim specialist at Chubb Insurance, and that's how I began my career in insurance, very accidentally.
Wow. And let me just, I know there's a second part to that question as well, but let me just hone in on something you just said. So, Chubb was an existing client for your law firm, and you'd had some experience with them or some exposure to them while working on their matters within your law firm?
We had not begun to work on their matters. We were being interviewed by the carrier to become a member of their panel in
Got it.
order to be
Okay.
assigned cases. So
Got
I
it.
did work with other insurance carriers more on the auto side. We were already on their panel, but in the
Hmm.
executive liability space, we were not yet on the panels of various insurance companies. And at that time, we were interfacing with Chubb to become a member of their panel.
Got it. So, how did that, how did that even transpire? Did you just reach out to somebody that you were about to work with, or how did that happen? And I'm focusing in on this because it's so important when we talk to young lawyers about networking, business development, developing relationships with clients, etc. And there are a myriad of ways that this can happen. So I just find it interesting that this is how it sort of happened and transpired with you. So specifically,
Right. So I did send in my resume. So
okay,
I still had to go through that process of sending in my resume, but once that resume was picked up, I was able to do some name dropping, right?
that.
Of, of people I had interfaced with in the company, and they were actually delighted that I had some background knowledge, at
Mm-hmm.
least even having not worked in the space of insurance, but knew some of the players already within the organization. And I think that helped me considerably, as I said, because I was negotiating with the partners of the law firm in meetings because at the time I was one of the attorneys who had employment experience. Although a new attorney, I had interned at the EEOC. And so when we're trying to now get on the employment panel, I was able to speak to some of the employment claims that I've handled for the firm, for other clients, as well as my experience at the EEOC. And so again, negotiating and talking to the Chubb panel, I was able to utilize names that had met in that process. And then when I was called for an interview, I was able to speak to some of those relationships.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's great. Okay, so the second part of that question, why you've
Yes.
stayed for so long.
A couple of reasons. And I am of a certain generation. And oftentimes, I think for me, starting a career and then ultimately having a family, there was a comfort level. And
Mm-hmm.
plus, I enjoyed the work that I was doing and still do. Um, I had the new area of insurance coverage, right? Which took some time to get my feet wet and learn that discipline. And it's ever evolving as case law does and ever expanding. And then also, as well as that, the coverage piece, I also had areas of the law that really stirred my passion, namely employment practices liability or employment
Mm-hmm.
insurance. So I was able to kind of connect those passions into one. And
Great.
I stayed so long, I guess 20 years is long based upon what you're saying.
It
Once
is
upon a
long.
time, it was commonplace, but I understand generational shifts and
Yeah.
movements, and I understand it, and I support that in the present
Yeah.
day. And so but I think I stayed because of the ever evolving law is ever changing. So it's
Yeah.
not static. So even though I've been doing employment law for 20 years, it's ever growing and ever
Right.
changing. And there's new laws and new statutes. Same thing on the security side, which I interface with securities law because directors and officers liability insurance, which we place for our clients. So I think because number one, the subject matter ever evolving has challenged me significantly, both on the insurance coverage side well as substantive issues involving employment law, securities law, even I dibble and dabble somewhat on ERISA because we do
Mm-hmm.
fiduciary policies. So it's not the same thing every day. And
Right.
because the law is ever changing, that maintained my interest.
Got it.
As
So
well
it's
as I said, there's a point where you get to your life where at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not suggesting this for others, but my thought was I wanted to have safety and security. And my husband would even
Mm-hmm.
say that's pretty high on my list, safety and
Okay.
security. And so, and it seemed to me that if the interest of the job was still there,
Right.
then why move,
Why
right?
change?
Why
Why
change?
make a move? Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
why make a move? And so, and that was my thought process, certainly over these last 20 years.
Yeah, and the culture's worked for you, the people that you've worked for, all everything else has been in place for you as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think the culture, and I think in many uh, environments, particularly in Fortune 250, Fortune 500 companies,
Mm-hmm.
there is, and the cultures can vary from company to company. But when I think about my organization, we're one of the largest insurance brokers in the world, and I think the CEO of the company is quite a visionary. They're always raising the bar,
Yeah.
always raising the bar. And so I think, and it's consistent with the company's values are consistent with my own, right?
Excellent.
Yeah, they're consistent with my own. And so that's not been ever an issue for me. And as I grown my career and have maintained my career substantially at Aon. So yeah, that has come together.
Wonderful. So I love that your title on your LinkedIn page, it says, obviously you're claim counsel, senior vice president over at Aon, but it says diversity champion, justice, and equity seeker. I love that that's in your title, right?
Yes.
And that's just part of the fabric of who you are. Talk to us a little bit about the DEI work that you've been doing. And before we jump into sort of advocating for yourself, tell us why that work is obviously so very important to you and important in this space as we all just try to move the needle in doing this work. This is part of the work of this podcast as well, right? But talk
Yes.
to us a little bit about that, and then we'll jump into the advocating piece.
Very good. Thank you for the question, Erica. And I think when I think about DE&I, which is now more of a catchphrase now, because
Mm-hmm.
and I say that not to minimize it, but
Yeah.
there are many of us who have been in the trenches advocating for inclusion, opportunity, equity before it became a separate department, right? If I look back at my early even my law school days, right? And we were
Mm-hmm.
members of BALSA and other organizations or other groups really seeking the same thing, right? To connect and coalesce with other like minded individuals, right? To move equity forward
Yeah.
and pursue justice. And so, and I think that's really, even when I think back on my days in undergrad, that was before, again, long before there's a department called DE&I, we were
Right.
doing that, right? And so, and I think certainly as I became, once I became an attorney, and you see that there are fewer people in the profession who look like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and you want to do something to change that, right?
Right.
And so, and support the growth of women of color in our profession. And so, going in Aon, I've been involved in the diversity team since they rolled out. I would say even about 15 years ago. In fact, I saw them as very much a lifeline in the organization for me, because it gave me an opportunity. Remember, in corporate spaces, sometimes you might be the one and the
Mm-hmm.
only, or
Mm-hmm.
a few, right?
Right.
And so you need to find a safe place in order to kind of exist. And
Right.
so for the diversity teams have been a big part of that for me. And that includes the Black Professional Network, the Latino Professional Network, Asian Pacific Islander Network. I've been engaged in all the BRG teams because I see the commonality between all the teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the cause is to promote justice and equality and opportunity in corporate
Mm-hmm.
spaces. And so I think that's a wonderful um, goal, as aspirational many times, and it's never over. It's
Right.
always continuing to push and always continuing to grow. And I say that even as I look at my career, the trajectory of my career, because there's another generation behind me. And the hope is
Absolutely.
that they will benefit from the hard work of this
Right.
present generation, right? Of my generation.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that's
And
what
and carry the torch for the next generation.
it
Absolutely.
carry it and pay it forward. So I
Yeah.
think it's a, it's not an easy area. Remember, this is not what I'm paid to do, right?
Right.
It's not in my title as far as my official title at my organization, but I see it as an absolute imperative for companies who are smart
Hmm.
to engage and looking at the demographics of our world. It's smart for everyone to have an opportunity to participate on an equal basis.
Yeah. What does that look like as you've done this work at Aon? What has that looked like, and what changes have you seen over the last 15 years? Where has the needle actually been moved within your organization?
I think in a couple of ways. And let me be clear, just as with my organization and many others, sometimes change is incremental.
Hmm.
Sometimes it will move a little quicker than other areas, and depending on what's happening. And so, but there's always work to do, right? As I
Absolutely.
said earlier, the work is never done.
It's never
But some
done.
of the
Never
things,
done.
positive things I've seen is that, having a BRG team in your networking groups or any affinity teams, particularly if your company has said, this is very important to us. And
Hmm.
now, because it's important to us, we're going to also put some budget behind it, right? And so when you have a budget, now you can do things to support your constituency, whether that's supporting it. For example, for last year, we were able to get funding for Corporate Counsel Women of Color, and we were able to sponsor at a pretty decent level, which allowed us to participate. So we were able to support the professional development of
Right.
several colleagues who were able to attend. In addition, having a budget also allows us to support local nonprofits, right, who's doing work in the community. So it's one thing to have your name on I guess, the now third tallest building in Los Angeles, and no
Right.
one knows who you are, right?
Right.
But by
Right.
engaging in, because, we're a B2B organization, we're not a consumer, we're business to business. And so we're on this great skyline in Los Angeles. And there's this thought that, what's AON? And a lot of people will say, well, are you work for AON? I'm like, it's Aon.
Right.
But
Right.
now connecting into community organizations, whether,
Hmm.
the March of Dimes, Adelante Mujer Latina, we were able to do funding to get recognition. And it wasn't about recognition as much as it was to support,
Support
um, yeah,
these
support,
initiatives.
yeah,
Got it.
community initiatives.
This show is sponsored by Round Hill Legal Search. For the past 10 years, Round Hill Search has been placing attorneys of all levels with our trusted clients, from AmLaw 100 firms to the solo practitioner. Visit us at roundhillsearch.com for more information, to find great legal talent, or to step into your next legal role. So, Darlene, I want to pick up a conversation we were having last week. We were talking about women and women of color advocating for themselves. Why, when, how. I was telling you about two recent scenarios where, actually, two stories. One where we were talking to a candidate who has been at her law firm for 3 years, and she didn't get the year end bonus that she was anticipating. And she didn't know what to do about it. She said, I'd worked on three major cases that had come into this firm, and I was expecting a bigger bonus. So, what she did, and I was really proud of her for what she did, she had the meeting, she went away, and then she came back to her employer and said, I feel like I deserved a bigger bonus, and I'd want to sort of re-review, have another look at this, because this is what I've done. And the employer said, okay, let's have a look at it in 6 months from now. We understand what you've said. Yes, you did do the work. This is what it is, but we'll review your work in 6 months from now. So The outcome wasn't what she wanted, but I was still proud of her for going in and advocating for herself, right? I think oftentimes, and the flip side of that story is getting the notification about the bonus, being disgruntled about it, and not doing anything about it,
Mhm.
right? But when it comes to advocating for yourself, it doesn't just mean about bonuses and salaries. It means the ability to work on different matters, opportunities that come up at firms. And I still think, although strides have been made with us, they haven't gone far enough because I'm still having far too many conversations about advocating for ourselves and women speaking up. So, talk to us a little bit about times in your career when you have spoken up for yourself and maybe when you haven't spoken up for yourself, and why this is just still such an important conversation as well.
Thank you, Erica, for sharing that story of another client and her experience because it's not unique. You're right. You're still having that same discussion with attorneys who've been in the trenches for a long time,
Yep.
right? And you would think the further you are in your career that these discussions go away and somehow we've solved the problem. And the fact of the matter is that they're still ever present, whether you're 10 years, 3 years into your career, or 5 years, or even 20 years into your career. And so, I'm proud of your uh, the person that you had the conversation with for standing up for herself, right?
Absolutely.
It just really just to stand up for herself and say, listen, something's not right here,
Mm-hmm.
right? She didn't get the outcome that she was maybe hoping for in that immediate exchange, and they're going to revisit it in 6 months. But she did make them aware that this was not right,
Right.
and so I think that causes one to uh, when I think about the strength she needed to exhibit to do that, because there are many times when women, and I'm going to be very clear, specifically Black women
Mm-hmm.
have, and Latina women,
Mm-hmm.
we take what we're given, right?
Absolutely.
We don't express any discontent at all, even though we're very upset internally, and that's how that internal eating away at you happens and that stress occurs. So, similar to what, you know, this woman had done, I think it's important to stand up to say, even when you're not happy with something, to let it be known, right?
Right.
Especially something significant when it comes to your compensation. And I think it's just a matter of, it causes one, I think, the person you're speaking to, whether it's your manager, um, there's a certain level of respect that's required, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
have these exchanges. And so this person has indicated to her management that she felt, given the hard work she had put in, even though there were some other structural issues occurring, but given the hard work she had put in, that she should have been recognized with a bonus. And that
Yes.
she raised that issue with them was critically important because otherwise they would have thought, well, see, she agrees with us. She
Right.
understands why she didn't get the bonus. And they would have gone on their merry way. This has at
Mm-hmm.
least caused them to take some pause now to reflect upon the arguments that she presented as to why she deserved the bonus. And so I give her a feather in her cap for doing that because she stood up for herself. And it was just to me, she respected her own values, right? She
Yes.
knew, and she respected her own self-worth. And she had to give that voice. And I think that's what, I would say to myself, to give
Mm-hmm.
it voice. When you believe that you've earned something and were uh, maybe passed over, give that voice. And to whether it's your management team, whoever was the decision maker, and it may or may not be successful in giving you that immediately, whether it was the bonus or the new position, but it will let the person you're speaking to, your audience, know that if you have questions, you're going to raise them. And especially if something doesn't feel right and doesn't seem right, you want it to be taken, seriously and perhaps even reevaluate it. And that's probably even the first step, because if you say nothing, nothing ever
Right.
changes.
Right. And I think you hit on some really important points there. So I often say to individuals, if you say nothing, what is the impact of you saying nothing? Right? The impact of you saying nothing is so wide and far reaching. It's your own mental health, your own the stress, the fact that you're not necessarily being a role model for others, you're not getting what you want. So the impact of you saying nothing is often more than what you could in fact gain,
Uh,
right? From
so
speaking
well
up.
said. So well said, Erica. And I think that for all of those reasons that you hit up on, it's worse to not speak up, right?
Right.
It really, it just, it wreaks havoc with your health. It wreaks havoc with your, even your self-esteem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you begin to question your own self, right? And
Absolutely.
so I think for all of those reasons you stated, it's probably the most beneficial thing, even if you don't get the result immediately, but
Right.
even for your own self, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that you stood up. And I will tell you, I had an example from many years ago, and I was being challenged by a broker that I work with who had been in the business for a very long time. And, this particular broker, and some brokers are JDs or have law experience, law trained, and many others are not. And so I know the law. I am a trained lawyer. And so when the particular person was advocating that I take a particular approach with no appreciation for the facts or the
Mm-hmm.
law that I'm
Mm-hmm.
required to know, that this
Right.
is my job. And
Right.
so, and they were really pushing me into a corner on something. And I pushed back. I pushed back because I felt that if I didn't speak up for myself, then I would allow anyone to push me in a corner and even
Mm-hmm.
compromise my ethics, right? Our obligations as attorneys, right? We know the facts of our case, and many people are not in our position. And so that's where I stood up. And this had nothing to do with compensation, it had to do with a
Right.
strategy in a particular case. But in that moment, I stood up for myself and I pushed back. And the result of that, from that individual later on, that person called my manager and wanted to apologize for
Mm.
his behavior, right?
Wow.
Wanted to apologize. And this was, and I would say, even senior statesmen in our profession, right? Not
Right.
legal profession, but in the broker insurance side. And so, but when I pushed back and decided that I was not going to take, because I knew instinctively he was wrong, right? I
Right.
knew from my training he was wrong. It wasn't right. And so I pushed back, and he later contacted the leader of my team to express that he wanted to know how he should approach me. He wanted to apologize, and he wanted to talk to my manager to explain what happened and things of that nature. And I think I grew 10 feet that day.
Yeah.
I stood
Absolutely.
taller,
Absolutely.
my back was up, and I just said, you know what? You cannot be a doormat. Do not let
Right.
someone run over you when you know you're right.
Right.
Right. And so that's one example I would share with your audience. It's like when you just know you're right, stand up for yourself. Stand up for
Absolutely.
yourself.
And it doesn't, that in that scenario it turned out well for you because you got the apology, right? It doesn't always turn out like that, right? So there are a couple things here. So as women, as black women, we're going up against the whole the optics of being that aggressive black woman, right? Okay, you're going up against those labels. My challenge to listeners is you got to continue to exercise that muscle in small things on a day-to-day basis, so when the big things come up, you're ready to handle them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like going to the gym and trying to lift that 50-pound weight, but you haven't been weight training for the last year to be able to lift that weight. So it's practicing day to day on the small things in advocating for yourself, even if you don't think, oh, it's not worth me saying anything here. No, it is worth saying something, right?
It is.
And
Don't self-sabotage and don't silence yourself. And so often, and I will be clear with you and your audience, I was guilty as that, as guilty as that as the
absolutely.
next person. Because whether it's our socialization, because of the tropes that we hear oftentimes,
Hmm.
right? And we kind of silence ourselves and shrink ourselves. And let me share with you an experience I had even with my child, which kind of brought this to bear on me. I saw my child, this bright, inquisitive kid, right? And he was in an environment, not many other children who looked like him. And
Hmm.
he had gone to another school where the curriculum was very advanced for
Hmm.
their ages. And so when he transferred to another school, he was really ahead. But that just had to do with what he was taught, right, at his
Right.
other location. It wasn't didn't mean he was just smarter and for all time. But I don't want to minimize how bright he was.
Right.
But I saw him, he recognized that he was smarter than a lot of the other children. It was just because
Hmm.
the curriculum at the other school was much more advanced, and he began to shrink. And I could
Mm.
see that. And it's nothing like seeing it in your own child
Right.
who
Right.
has now decided, I don't want these people to know how smart I am. I'm going
Wow.
to shrink. That was hurtful and painful on so many different levels. And then I
Hmm.
said, but am I guilty of the same thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's what, if I could tell your audience, don't cause yourself to shrink to make others feel comfortable.
If you're enjoying today's conversation, please share with another attorney in your network and send us your questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com. And translate that now to the workplace, like the impact of you speaking up. You are acting as a role model for others, right? You are giving other people in your space, that next young black associate coming up behind you, permission to speak up, right? And if we really look at it closely, white men are great at doing this, are great at advocating for themselves, right? And we need to do it in a different way, I think. Information, backing up what, like this young associate going in and asking for a raise or what have you. You can't just go in and ask, right? We need to have data, we need to have information. And so you need to be prepared for those moments as well. And I can't emphasize that enough when I'm talking to candidates, applicants, and they say, well, I need to ask for a raise or what have you. Okay, why? Okay,
Mhm.
you can't just go in and ask for it just willy-nilly. You need to back it up with information, you need to back it up with stats. And if you get a response, a negative response that's, no, we can't do that, then I always think it's important to advocate for yourself in a way of, okay, what do I need to do by when? So now now you've got information from them as to what
Yes,
you need to do. So when you go back around, you can say, well, you said XYZ. This is what
correct,
I've been able to do within this period of time, right? Because
correct.
you're now working with facts, right? It's not just, oh, I'm pulling that out of the hat.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I also want to be mindful that I have seen other people able to, where, as you say, we have to have the data, bring the facts, and here's the
Hmm.
documentation, and here's all the file. Here you go, nice
Right.
in a bow for you. Now, let's not overlook that there are others in the organization who may not have to have done all of that, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So let's be
Yeah.
clear that we recognize that there are others in the organization because they knew Bob, and Bob was the hiring person, and they play at the same golf course, or their families know one another, that they're
Hmm.
able to kind of move and progress through the
Right.
organization. So I don't want to, to suggest to the audience that those things do not occur. So, but we recognize sometimes that we have to have our facts down cold and solid
Right.
when we're
Right.
asking for those same things. So it's not fair, you know, but it's unfortunately one of the things that we have to do in order to establish that, listen, here's my numbers for this year, here's the what I've been able to accomplish, here's my contribution to the organization, not only
Mm-hmm.
inside the organization but outside in the community, things of that nature, whether it's in addition to what I'm expected to do in my job and in my role, but how else am I contributing to the organization through my DEI efforts and through raising the visibility of the organization in the community, et cetera, and whatever you. And I'm sure there's plenty that your audience members can list, but I think that it is important to be prepared to have those discussions and have the information ready when you go in. And
Absolutely.
if you don't get the response that you were hoping for in the short term, then you'd like to revisit that at a later date. When would that?
Absolutely.
And then to get that going on calendar as to whether you calendar or let's reconnect in next quarter, whatever the time frame may be. And that way you're sending the message to the person you're speaking to that this is a very important issue to you, be so important. I think we should revisit it. Let's get a date on calendar or reconnect. And that way, the person that you're speaking to also will say, listen, this is a really important for Mary. Let's call her Mary. And Mary has made it clear that she wants to keep the discussion going. So we need
Mm-hmm.
to be equally prepared when we come back to talk to Mary. And if we've given her basically guidelines or things that she needs to
Benchmarks.
complete, then if she completes those, we need to be prepared to respond
Absolutely.
positively.
Absolutely. And that's why the questions are so important. What are the benchmarks? What do I need to improve on? What do I need to do? So you have that information as well. So the importance of, we can't diminish the importance of asking questions as well. And another piece that I want to highlight is even as you're going along, asking for feedback, right? I think that's important. I was speaking to an associate just recently, and she was saying, I'm not getting anything back. I'm not, my work, the work product, I'm sending it in, I'm not getting anything back, right?
Mhm.
And it seemed as if that partner was received her work and then was just working on it, and then it went out the door, right? But she wasn't getting anything back. I think it's really important to ask for feedback, but not just verbally, like via email, asking for that feedback. Where can I improve? What did I do well here? Because now you're even creating your a track record, right? You're getting that information via email. So when the time comes, you can say, well, on this day, you said I did this well, you said I did this well, and then you can work on the spaces or the places that you need improvement as well. So I think those questions are really important. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. I would agree. But then I also, especially if an associate is working with a partner, and if the partner sees something, let's admit, not everyone is very proactive in guiding their associates, especially in their
Absolutely.
growth. They're just
Yeah.
not that proactive. They have
Yeah.
cases they're trying to work on, they're billing, things of that nature. And so they're not spending that development time that really they should. Because
Right.
my thought would also be not to be contrarian, because I'm also putting the onus too. Well, you can say own your career, Darlene, but if
Yeah.
you have a manager who's really not interested in you developing your career, even though I'm doing those things to help me grow that I'm thinking would help me grow, I'm asking for feedback. But if that's not critical or important to the manager that you're working with, especially because I would argue if that particular partner had seen something of concern, then I think the onus was also on the partner to say to the associate, "Hey, Mary, I got your brief on this, and I went through the draft, and here's some feedback I like to give you, especially
Hmm.
if it didn't hit the mark." But then you
Right.
have to assume if the attorney took the work and then finished up the job or whatever else was next, and you received no feedback, then my thought would be, it was probably okay. I didn't hear anything. So I'm thinking also, I think it works on both sides because I have
Right.
heard own your career, but then
Hmm.
you own your career, but you're working with a management team who's really not really interested in promoting your development. So that could be problematic on that side, even when you see that you're owning your career. Because I've heard that and I've seen that, but it has to be you're earning your career because you have management on the other side that's very interested in your growth and development.
Right. And I would add on to that and say if you don't have that team that's interested in your development, or you're not getting feedback, and after a year or after 6 9 months you hear all this feedback that isn't in your favor, or the things that you've done wrong but you haven't been getting it all the way along, then that's the point where you have to question whether you're in the right place. Right.
Very, very good. Exactly. Because, unless you're get that feedback that you need, and that's one, but then also working with a team who's interested in your growth and development,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some people may be very comfortable with you where you are, and so if they're not interested in your growth and development, then they're not going to pour into you, right, the things that you
Absolutely.
need. And if you see that, then that should be a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. And then all of this ties into sort of, yes, you're advocating for yourself, but proactive visibility as well, right? You've done something well. You've done something that is great, whether it's a piece of work, or you're now on this new committee or whatever it is, and the onus is on you to then make yourself visible to others, right? And I think that sometimes it's like, okay, I don't want to brag, I don't want to, toot my own horn too much. But those are the moments, and I think we got to exercise that muscle of proactive visibility.
We do, Erica, and I think we have to learn that because I think we start with women are so socialized to not toot our own horns,
Mm-hmm.
right? We just are socialized. I think I've seen something just recently on LinkedIn. It's an advertisement about it with these young, cute little girls, maybe 6, 7 years of age, and they're saying, by the time I've reached 6 or 7 years of age, you've not given me a toy that's in the sciences, right, or in the STEM
Mm,
areas. And so you listen to this whole commercial and you see that it starts very young with the
yeah.
way women are socialized with dolls. And in my case, I had an easy bake oven. When
Right.
it's no longer made, but that was the toy that I was just like craving, and I got it for Christmas one. But I had an easy bake oven. And you saw these little girls in the ad speak about how women and the socialization starts early for girls. And even the being humble and kind of
Right.
quiet about being smart and
Right.
intelligent. That stuff starts early. And so the concern is, and now then you're in corporate spaces and you continue on with that pattern. And so now you almost have to retrain your way of thinking. And that's why it feels uncomfortable when we say, but I've earned this and here's what
Yep.
I've done, right? It feels
Yep.
uncomfortable. And so I was speaking with someone about it. We talked about the humble brag. Do we have to humble brag and what
Right.
have you? When you see
Right.
your
What's
colleagues around us,
the brag? What's the humble brag? Is like, oh, it's nothing. Oh, it's not a big deal.
oh, it's
That sort of.
nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we
Mm,
downplay our accomplishments and our greatness and our successes. And it's repeated. And as I say, I recently was speaking to a colleague of mine, and she works in another office out of state. And I follow her on LinkedIn, and she's just doing amazing work. And I said, I found this award that I wanted to nominate her for. And I just thought, I have to really make sure you're getting your flowers. I said, I'm impressed by
mm,
everything you're doing. And her reaction was she appreciated that I thought of her to nominate her. But she said, next sentence was, she doesn't do it for the recognition. And I'm just like,
mm. Wow.
but you know what? It's ingrained. I
Yeah.
know your
Yeah.
hard work is really, you want to serve your clients. You like
Yep.
getting good results. The end result is not you getting this award. That's not what you were looking for. But so often we minimize those things that raise our visibility, right?
Right.
And I saw it in her as I've seen it in me, as I've probably seen it in a
Yeah.
lot of our colleagues that we work with, how we just kind of, well, I don't do it for the recognition. So,
Right. But I
anyway.
love how you were intentional about that, even that nomination, about seeking out ways to shine a light on her as well,
Oh yeah, very intentional. And I am very intentional with a host of other women that I work with and in groups that I'm a part of. If I see an opportunity to raise their visibility and shine the spotlight, because listen, the reality is that they may have been overlooked for far
Mm-hmm.
too long. And if there's an opportunity for me to shine the spotlight on a particular individual, either through a nomination or otherwise, then I will not hesitate to do that. And I think that for me, where I am in my career, and I think of the larger picture of raising the voices of those who may not have been seen and heard, right? And how can I do that? And
Right.
so that could be introducing you to someone in my network who can, help you achieve something that you would like to, or sharing in the community something about you positive, or nominating you for an award. In fact, when I this colleague I had spoken with, and she explained to me when I saw this award, again, it's not in the state of California. So
Mm-hmm.
she explained to me that this particular award was for X group.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, I can see your thought process there. But I actively went on another search to find out another award that was better suited. And
Wonderful.
so now
That's
I'm on
great.
this quest to find an
Right.
award because of the wonderful work she's doing for our organization. So, anyways, and yes, you have to be intentional and commit to uplifting and raising the voice of another colleague who looks like you or of a diverse background to make sure they are seen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and I love that, and it's something that I'm going to actually continue to do more of, because you see these awards crossing your desk. The Los Angeles Business Journal, they just got one that came out recently. And it's like, okay, let me stop for a minute and see who is in my network that I could really, really help, because you're advocating for them as well. And then once she receives the award, hopefully she'll get the award, but it's making it known as well. It's making it known far and wide as well, on your social media platforms, within your firms, within your corporate legal departments, making it known that you have been the recipient of XYZ award.
And I say a nominee or recipient, because
Exactly.
someone thought enough that your work stood out and took the time to nominate you. And I can assure you that the I have nominated at least 5 women for the Los Angeles Business Journal Award, because I think it's a great local publication that is
Yep.
seen by the business community and resonate within the Los Angeles area. And so I have nominated women, deserving women,
Mm-hmm.
both from the Corporate Counsel Award, In-House Counsel Award. And each have been recognized with some winning their categories. And
That's amazing.
so, and that's again a way to shine a light on wonderful leaders who probably have not necessarily had the spotlight on them before, but
Uh,
absolutely deserved it.
yeah, and as you said, even if they even if they don't actually win, the nomination is equally as important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The nomination is just as important as winning the category,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because someone is usually either a client or a colleague who knows of your work, has taken the time to nominate you. And the process involves submitting information on that candidate, on the nominee, and you know, bios and photos and what have you. So that someone has taken the time to submit a nomination because they must believe in you, right? And
Absolutely.
so, and that's something to be proud of.
Yeah. So let's shift the conversation a little bit. I mean, it all ties in my mind, but to what you do to maintain your well-being when it comes to mental health, right? Because we're talking about advocating for yourself. Some of us have a hard time doing so, And when that is left and you're not advocating for yourself, that can sort of exacerbate any mental health issues that are happening. But even before it gets to that, what do you do right now to take care of your mental health and sort of make sure it doesn't get there?
Well, and I will say, I think we all have, I think the pandemic that we all
Yep.
have come through had took a number on all of us, I think, emotionally and mentally. I can see it far and wide, not
Mm-hmm.
only in our profession, but certainly in other areas as well, just in even common decency with one another.
Right.
And so I've seen that it's taken its toll in many respects. So just speaking in terms of our profession, the legal profession, and the challenges, because it's such, this is a, can be a very intense profession. And I remember that I think the State Bar of California had this program called the Other Bar, which spoke to
Mm,
the alcoholism and mental health issues in our profession, even pre
yeah.
pandemic. So if you look at some of those MCLE courses about alcoholism in the profession, substance abuse in our profession, it's pretty substantial. And
Yeah.
so, but if you understand our profession, we have the responsibility of solving big problems for
Mm-hmm.
clients, right? Whether that's on the transactional and the litigation space, in the coverage insurance space. So we have the responsibility of solving really big problems and many times with lots of money involved,
Right.
multi-million dollars.
Multi-million. Yep.
Yes. And so, so if you think that pressure by itself
Right.
is not enough, add in the responsibilities that we have, family, maybe board obligations,
Mm-hmm.
community. So you add all of that in and just this, it's amazing that we're able to get up in the morning.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so so what I say is, as I continue to try to find ways to find peace and quiet, and that may mean, for example, once a month, a group of colleagues and friends and I, some are lawyers, some are not,
Mm-hmm.
we have a spa day. Um,
Nice.
but and that's great, but that's one
Yeah.
day a month. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and then other days, like these last few days, each morning I've gone out for a beautiful walk. I was able, of staying up the coast to see the ocean, which is my happy place,
Yep.
right?
Mine too,
Looking at
actually.
the water. Yeah. So, I try to build in those things more frequently. Sometimes it's not possible, but even if we take a moment and use our Calm app, our Headspace
Mm-hmm.
app on our phone to just take a deep breath, inhale and exhale, that matters. I'm hoping cumulatively it matters, but we really have to be proactive about our mental health. And because if we are not, it also impacts our physical well being.
Absolutely.
And so, and I've experienced all of that. And so it's not a bad thing to take time out for yourself. Uh, the time we put into solving big client problems, we deserve to at least put some time in to solve in our own problems, and then also just decompress, really. It's
Absolutely.
decompress, detach, turn off the phone, put down the email, and it's okay to spend some time with yourself.
Absolutely. And I would even take it a step further. I love that you do the spa day every month. I try to really encourage my team here at Round Hill to do on a daily basis. Have you been out for a walk? Have you taken a walk in nature today? And then get them to send me a picture of something that they've seen outside, like really, really taking the time out, because I'm happy that the conversation has come to the forefront about mental health as well, because especially in this profession, it was not something that was necessarily spoken about widely, even 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So I'm happy that we can have these conversations, but it's a matter of doing something daily for yourself, daily.
And I agree with you, Erica, and I want to get better at that. And I have fits and starts. So
Yeah.
some I will be on a roll for good. I'm checking my Fitbit app and how many
Right.
steps did I get in. And then other days, then okay, I get slammed one day. And see, when you miss that one day, it's easier to miss that next day of that
Right.
walk or that self-care that you were practicing. And so, and then you have to get back on the horse and get out there again. So I appreciate what you're saying. I absolutely agree to carve out that time daily. I mean, even when we talk about, when we listen to some of the medical experts and they talk about a 30-minute walk a day will save you from, even like 30 minutes, not even an
Right.
hour, not even 2 miles or
Exactly.
3 miles, but a nice brisk walk can ward off so many other health issues, right? And so, and that's what I think it's imperative that we really begin to prioritize on a daily basis,
Yeah.
carving out time for our mental and physical well-being.
Yeah, and it's really exercising the muscle when it comes to that, to the mental health, because that is the foundation of being able to advocate for yourself because you're in the right mental
Mhm,
space to be able to do
mhm,
so and
mhm.
recognize when you need to do so as well. So
And
I
you're
would,
better for, not only are you better for yourself, you're better for everyone else around you,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You're better for everyone if you're in great, mode and you feel good and you're well rested and not overly stressed. That's great for you. The win is for you, but it also benefits your family, your
Mhm.
clients, your
Mhm.
colleagues, right? It's a win-win for
Absolutely.
everyone.
Yeah. You show up and you're in a better space for everybody.
Yes.
Um, so as we're talking about advocating for yourself, and you are sort of 20 plus years deep into your career, even today at this point in your career, like we're our audience is probably a lot earlier on in their career, but even today, um, do you often have to remind yourself about that, about advocating for yourself today?
All the time. All the time. Because the socialization that,
Mm-hmm.
that's ingrained in us. And now I tell you, it feels sometimes uncomfortable when you push
Yep.
back. But then when you do, you feel so proud of yourself, right? You
Yeah.
feel so proud of it. It should be normal, right? It should be the
Right.
normal thing. But yeah, it takes a lot more energy and a lot more effort because you want to go back to the old, right? What you
The
were
comfort
taught.
space.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
And so now to push back. But I remind myself that if I don't, it makes it that much more comfortable and easy for someone who is in a position of power and management to say, well, so she took it just
She's all
fine.
right.
She's just,
She's
yeah,
good.
she's okay. She's all
Yeah.
right. And I'm just like, no. So I've had even recently, I've had a similar discussion with my management team, and
Right.
so and I always feel great. I feel empowered after I haven't gotten the response yet, and I expect that
Right.
will be coming, because it's under consideration. I said, but
Yeah.
I felt powerful in that moment of standing up
Yeah. And it
for my.
goes back to what we were saying. You might not get the response that you wanted, but that's okay. You're exercising that muscle,
You're
right? And
exercising
you're
the
gonna
muscle.
go back. You're
It
gonna
makes it
go
easier for
back.
the next time. I'll go back. I
Exactly.
want to get the response, but the next time it comes up, it makes it easier because you recognize
Absolutely.
what's the worst thing that can happen. They could say no, right?
Yeah.
And so, but you're hoping that you've been able to persuade and made your viewpoint known and your arguments known, and that there will be some movement. But you also recognize that, hey, I survived the last time I asked, right?
Right.
And I think that gives you a little more, that strengthens that muscle that you were speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about the recruiting world, it's a little different, but there's a sales component of it as we're going out and developing business. And I tell my team sometimes, I'm like, you don't just call once. You don't even call twice. Sometimes you're not going to get a response until the fifth, sixth, seventh time, right?
Mhm.
So what's that old adage? This the squeaky wheel gets the oil,
The
or something
oil.
like that.
That's right.
So not that it's okay if you don't get the elicited response the first time. Sometimes you got to go back once, twice, and a second time, and a third time as well. So as you, what advice would you give to your younger self about this conversation specifically? Like, cast your mind back to your early years of your career. What would you what advice would you give yourself that our learners could, or our listeners could benefit from?
Very good. You know what? And I have the opportunity recently to counsel a young lady um, who was feeling a little disenchanted,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to believe that you have the right to be in every room that you are in. You've earned that. No one gave it to you. You've earned it. And then you have to believe in your own greatness, in your own intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Do not minimize that to make others feel comfortable, as we indicated before. And so when I look back at my younger self, this bright-eyed new attorney, um, and there's this, there's deferring to more seasoned attorneys, and that's okay, but don't, and especially if you're learning, right, when
Right.
you're learning some things. But when you have input and have something to contribute, even if you're brand new,
Right.
contribute, add it,
Absolutely.
add it to the discussion. Don't just decide that this person who's more senior and seasoned has the lock on knowledge completely, right? And so
Absolutely.
you have to feel comfortable beginning to share your knowledge with others. And especially if, as a new associate or new attorney, whether you're in corporate or in your law firm, you were hired and you were brought in for a reason. So, and I say, let your light shine. Don't
Yeah.
dim your light. And if you don't speak up, no one will know how smart you are, or even if you have a view that differs, and you have to make that known, because
Right.
guess what? Your differing view may be ultimately what's landed upon later on
Right. Right.
after further
And it,
consideration and discussion.
yeah.
So recognize that you have something to contribute. Don't minimize it.
I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. As the president and founder of Round Hill Legal Search, I've spent over 2 decades connecting with incredible attorneys day in and day out. I decided it was high time that we share some of their remarkable stories, lessons, insights, and inspiration with the world. Join us as we have wonderful conversations with our guests, or simply a session talking about some career tips, advice for you as you light your own legal career path. Absolutely, and I love that. And it's sometimes that shift in perspective, right? That different perspective that is the spark for creativity as well. Because of your lived experiences, because of where you're coming from, you've got a different way of looking at this, which is great.
Completely different. But if you don't share that, then you fall in
Exactly.
line with everyone else. And just again, going back to something I saw just over the last few days on LinkedIn, it was really interesting. And it spoke to why diversity is so important. And it showed in this particular example, it was a festive event. Men they were doing this little game, fun little great game. Men were lined up holding hands, and the goal was to get a hula hoop to the end of the line, maybe 8 people
Hmm.
lined up. And it showed these men in line, and they were going through all these gyrations and configurations to get this hula hoop down to the next person. You could not break the chain. And I
Uh-huh.
think whatever, and they showed the timer, and maybe it had taken them 45 seconds, a minute. And then the next thing they show is women in a line of women, same exercise. And the first woman held the hula hoop, and all the other women just walked through. No one broke the chain.
Oh, wow.
It was
I love that.
was it classic? It was classic. It just showed how we think differently and we bring different things to the table. That's
Yes,
why
absolutely.
everyone needs a seat at the table. And I
Yes.
kind of thought, watching all of these men go through these gyrations, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, women would do that differently. And lo and behold, women, one held the hula hoop, everyone walked through.
All
And
went through. That's brilliant.
it was
That's
brilliant. And
brilliant.
so if you don't think diversity matters, we need to show everyone that video.
Yes, Absolutely.
And
I'm going to have
that's
to
why
find
it's
that video and put
important.
it in the notes.
You have to find the video. And then it's important for young attorneys, mid-career attorneys, even more senior attorneys, right? If we've been guilty of it, and I certainly have, let's use
Absolutely.
our muscle. Let's continue to raise our voice, right? And to present our vast knowledge as well as our brilliance to those that we are in the room with.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Darlene.
You're
So
welcome.
many gems in there. So that quote by Marianne Williamson, I want to read it because it's so important, and I love this quote. So, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others,
Remarkable. Remarkable.
right?
So there's the anthem right there.
There it
There,
is.
there,
There
there
it is.
it is. There it is. And I think that he said, I love that by Marianne Williamson. I also think that's, when you think about, as I mentioned to you earlier, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Yep.
Hymn, gospel, right? And we think about, even some of the scriptures. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? And so there is a power in believing in your own greatness, right?
Yeah.
There's certainly power in believing in your own greatness and sharing that with others. And
And
like I said,
sharing.
we all benefit. When you are able to show how great you are, guess what? That makes me better, Erica. It makes me
Exactly.
better. And so I'm just like, because I either say, wow, that's amazing. I want to be like Erica. Or, hey, Erica has just told me it's okay to be who I am, but just show it to everyone, right?
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we are at the top of the hour. I want to jump into Erica's Fun Five before we go. So let's do that. What is the best piece of advice that your mother or another influential woman has given you in your life?
My mother told me she was the most influential woman in my life ever. And it was really after I passed the bar exam when I just thought, what have I gotten into? Should have been so excited. Then I realized the responsibility of it.
Right.
And that caused me to go into a panic. And then she says, she told me, Darlene, you're so bright, you're so intelligent. If you don't want to do that, there's so many other things you can do. So she wasn't the mom who said, you spent all this time studying to be a lawyer as if it's now the only thing you can do. You're so bright and intelligent. There's so many other things you can do. And
Oh,
so,
wonderful.
in other
Yeah,
words,
choice.
she was telling me about you have choices. And even sometimes if
Choices.
you have to take risks, take them. You're smart.
Wonderful. I love that. I love that because you feel like you've gone down this path and you've spent so much time down this path, and now you may turn and do something else, but all that time has been wasted. But it hasn't. That's a whole nother show because I was
Whole nother
one of
show.
those that was going down this path and then decided to take a detour. So I love that. That's a great piece of advice. Choices. The most impactful book you've ever read is
Black boy Richard Wright.
what's that one? Say it again.
Black boy. I
Oh,
read it
okay.
I didn't read it until my first. I took a literature class, African American literature, Black boy, Richard Wright, but I would also put the autobiography of Malcolm X close by Alex Haley.
Excellent. One goal that you haven't accomplished yet that you still plan on reaching before you expire.
Well, let's see, a couple of things. Two, learn a foreign language fluently.
Okay.
And then secondly, it would be I'm thinking of I'd like to start a nonprofit or support a nonprofit that's focused on closing the wealth gap by teaching um, young people how to invest.
That's great and so well needed as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Wonderful. And the foreign language, which foreign language do you want to learn?
I'm teetering between French because I did dibble and dabble in French. Um, and so I'm going to keep it at French right now because I think I
Okay.
just need to dust off the books that I have and the training. I had gone to the Alliance Française to study, so maybe I will pick that up again.
Absolutely. And a great app that I'm on right now, Duolingo, if you haven't heard of it.
I've heard of it, but I have not
Yes.
tried it. So thank
Oh,
you.
you have to try it. Absolutely. Duolingo.
Okay.
Favorite quote and why?
Well, this is probably my recent quote that, and I say recent in terms of the impact that it's had on me. And it's like the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And that's become more prominent for me as we see a lot of the divisions in the world, the
Mm-hmm.
strife, a lot of the issues concerning diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, and I have to, and I've just remembered that, this is exhausting work.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's been a difficult journey, when you think about the fight for equality and you look at the civil rights leaders, it wasn't easy. I mean, many people lost their
No.
lives, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I get exhausted and fatigued, but I've decided that I have to stay in the game.
The
Yeah,
course. We have
yeah,
to.
you have to stay in the game. So
Yeah.
yes, so I remember that quote: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." So I'm hoping
Mm,
that even though things are moving slowly, and as we talk
right.
about moving the needle, snail's pace, my hope is that it's bending towards justice.
Absolutely. I love that. Hero or Shiro and why?
Well, and they change depending on what season of life we're
Yeah.
in. So recently, I studied it's the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education.
Mm-hmm.
That the Supreme Court said separate but equal is unconstitutional, and so and we hope they stay that way given the
Right.
changes on the court.
Mm-hmm.
But I have the opportunity to study some of the women of Brown versus Board of Education.
Mm,
And so it's amazing. These unsung sheroes that we did not know about, they are in the background of sorts. And so they've become my new sheroes, Constance Baker Motley, to name one of them. And so I would encourage any listeners, your audience, to take a look at Brown versus Board of Education, and the Legal Defense Fund has a write up on the women of Brown. And I think the
oh,
women who
wonderful.
participated in that are definitely now my sheroes.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm going to go and do some more research on that. Thank you, Darlene, so much. Thank you for being with us here this morning. Definitely appreciate the time. Loved our conversation. I feel like we could do a part two as well. So
I,
much to talk about.
well, thank you for providing this wonderful platform, Erica. I'm so proud of the work that you've long done to advance women and women of color in particular in our spaces. So I appreciate you and all the best to you always.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in and listening. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure that you share and subscribe to get new episodes as they come out. If you're an attorney looking for new opportunities, head to www.roundhillsearch.com to get in contact with one of our recruiting associates. And don't forget to send your career questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com. Until next time.